Peck is a member of the Board of Parole Hearings, and Stephanie K. Shimazu is a member of the California Gambling Control Commission, and we'll take them in that order. I want to make a very brief statement, if I might. This is really our first hearing to consider governor's appointees. And we welcome, of course, as we did last time, new Rules Committee members. Now is an opportunity and, in fact, a responsibility of this House to ensure that our state agencies, departments, and boards carry out their functions effectively, consistent with our laws, with integrity, and what the public expects and deserves from those who serve. The Board of Parole Hearings is one of the many public safety-related appointments that we see in this committee, and it's a very important job. You help to decide if someone who has committed a very serious, some might say heinous offense, whether they should be allowed to come back into society. The sentencing laws of our state allow that, but the balance is to strike the right balance between someone who has demonstrated, I suppose, in prison, the capacity and the ability to have learned from their past and would be safe to the public if they were released with pure public safety, which always comes first. Mr. Peck, come on up. With that introduction, we welcome you.
Thank you.
It is the tradition here in the committee for nominees to introduce their families or any other special guests who might be here with you today.
Today I have my wife Janine and my parents, Tom and Shirley Peck.
Welcome to you.
And my mother-in-law, Rosemary Hatton.
Wonderful.
And one of my sons, Zach.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome to your California State Capitol. A brief opening statement, and then we want to ask you some questions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Senators, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Serving as a commissioner over the past year has been a tremendous experience for me. I have 27 years of service with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, working with all levels of offenders. I feel this experience is very helpful when assessing someone's suitability or unsuitability for parole. Every hearing involves decisions that will have an impact. I always ask myself before deliberations, have we gotten enough information today to make an informed assessment? I consider each decision for each offender carefully and with diligence. While I was working in the conservation camp program in CDCR, I witnessed many offenders who were working to turn their lives around, who were giving back to the community. I also met with local community and statewide leaders and addressed citizen concerns about placing conservation camps and offenders in their communities. In all the meetings that we held regarding the camps, one thing was clear. Citizens want to feel safe, and our decisions needed to balance public safety for our citizens while providing opportunities for our offenders. I do believe in rehabilitation. I've seen it many times. Assessing public safety is the challenge of the job. Simply put, my job is to find those who do not pose a current unreasonable risk of dangerousness suitable for parole and to retain in prison those offenders who do pose an unreasonable risk until they can develop the skills necessary to function successfully in free society. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. I'm sure the members of the committee have questions. I will begin. We hear in these hearings that we hold for confirmation a lot about an inmate having a lack of insight into their crime as a justification for finding them unsuitable for parole. What does that mean to you, lack of insight? How do you assess it? And what role does it play in your decision-making?
Insight to me is how the offender understands himself as a person, how the offender understands their motivations that shape their lives, and if the offender understands the decisions that led to their involvement in the life crime.
Is it it's a subjective determination, like credibility, I assume.
It is, and because of the Chaputis decision, I think insight became more involved in our decision.
Explain that to the new members and maybe even some of the old members.
The court found that a lack of insight or remorse indicates a current unreasonable risk of dangerousness.
Got it. In
a sentence. I look at Title 15, 2402, which is the determination of suitability when I do these. And in reality, insight is not a determination, is not one of the listed as far as whether it's a lack of insight is an unsuitability factor. But it does fit in to the past and present mental attitude toward the crime. Making these decisions is a weighing factor.
Sure.
If somebody has absolutely no insight into why they committed their crime, why they were involved in this, how their life brought them to this. I'll give you an example. If alcohol was related to their life crime and they can't put the connection that alcohol was a problem, then they don't have any insight, and that makes it very difficult to find suitability. But it is a factor that we look at, and we have to assess whether the degree of insight makes them a present unreasonable risk of dangerousness.
One more question, then I'll turn it over. The issues of mental health and criminal justice have once again been tragically in the news over the last several days. And I note that the Inspector General issued a recent report on errors and shortcomings in the psychological reports made prior to an inmate suitability hearing. And these reports are intended to assess an inmate's risk of violence. How much confidence do you have in these reports? And maybe more importantly, what do you think the system needs to do to not only better assess the mental health issues of a parolee, but to help those who have mental health issues within the state correctional system?
I review the psychological evaluation before I even start the hearing. It's part of my prep. It's one of the first documents that I read.
Do you have confidence in the methodology?
I do. But that comes with a caveat that that's only a tool. The psychological evaluation is only a tool in assessing suitability. If I get there and through I think the best way to answer that is a psychological evaluation as far as the ratings go, as far as, high, moderates, or lows, have to be fact-based. There has to be a reason why somebody gets a high evaluation in the different factors, or a moderate, or a low. And if there's not fact-based, then the tool really is not as effective as I want it to be. I think the psychological evaluations are a whole lot better today than they were when I first started doing these hearings as a deputy commissioner. I got some psychological evaluations that were 2 pages that really didn't tell me a whole lot. But, as a tool, I think they're very valuable. Are they necessary to the hearing? Not. Are they helpful? Yes.
Did you read the OIG report?
I did.
And?
90% of the cases that I have, as far as psychological evaluations go, they're good. 10% I don't use.
Right. Thank you. Other members? Senator Alquist.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed our discussion, our 30-minute discussion that we had the other day. On the point that the Pro Tem has raised on the psychological evaluations, as you mentioned, 90% of the time you use it and about 10% of the time you don't. I also am aware of the Office of the Inspector General's report, and as someone who has a master's degree in counseling, and I believe in the use of a credible tool, I would ask a couple things. One is that in the conversation yesterday, I understood that the tool is used a lot, even though it is not mandatory. The Office of the Inspector General points out some problems of an inconsistency. And so what I would like to actually go on record saying is that I strongly believe in the use of a credible tool. it's the job of a commissioner to assess the suitability of parole for a person serving an indeterminate life sentence. And therefore, I think it's really important that we have accurate, reliable, and credible psychological evaluation so that the tool meets all of the above, as well as the person who gives the evaluation. And so I would like the parole board to know that I look forward to working with them and to receiving, I want to be sure that problems are corrected with the evaluations and that they are used consistently and that they are truly credible so you can count on them not 90% of the time, but 100% of the time. I think I had some questions that the pro tem asked, and I think that there were very good answers. So with that, I think enough said. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fuller.
I just had one question, and that is, how do you know what vocational programming is available for someone you're looking at?
At the institution, I know the vocational programs. I usually get a list of the programs that are available at the institution when I go to a board meeting. As far as the institution, what's available at the institutions, and when I get to the institution on Monday, I'll sometimes call to find out what's available. I can tell what kind of programs they've been involved in because when I look through the central file, I see their vocational certificates in there also, so I can tell what classes they've attended as far as vocational.
So you can kind of match the training available up with what you think they might do well with then.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask you, sort of let the pro tem talk about the system. Our system is not working too well in some areas, and particularly in the area of recidivism. I wondered if you had any thoughts on how our recidivism rate could be improved. What needs to be done to lower that rate? We're finding 50% of the people that are released wind up back in prison within 3 years. I may have the numbers off a little bit. I probably do, but I would be, because you deal with these people, you see them. Your career has been in that area. Give me some thoughts and comments you may have, if any.
One of the things that I saw when I worked in corrections, and especially today while I do these hearings, is this is
you need to get a little closer to the microphone.
Excuse me, thank you. I see people that come into the system as high school dropouts, a lot of them. They have no job skills. They have substance abuse problems. They have issues. And to me, we have to have an opportunity for them to get education. They have to get some job skills. One of the things that we did in the conservation camp program is that we taught a work ethic. And I think that's very important. Teaching work ethic, making sure everybody understands they got to get up in the morning, they got to go to work just like all the rest of us do in here, is extremely important. And then we got to find meaningful work, which is difficult in this challenging time we have right now. But I do think there's some programs out there that are very successful. The camp program is one of them. Very successful program. Even though, if you look at the recidivism rates, they were still, when I looked at it, it was probably about 40% way back when I was doing it. So, we have to educate the ones that come in that don't have an education. We have to provide vocational programs. We have to offer valid substance abuse programs. Because if we turn those people back out in the community, from what I've seen, is they're going to be back.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the insight.
Senator Harmon's question for me leads to one or two other questions, and we try not to talk about the B word in here, which is the budget, but it is relevant in the sense that I'm interested in your observation as to what you've seen in terms of the state of vocational rehabilitation programs within the state correctional system over the last number of years, and what impact that has had on your adjudication of these cases.
I see a lot of vocational programs with these guys. Now, some of it has been over the years, right? But I still do see vocational programs that people have been involved in. But they're not the same. From what I've seen, rather than teaching vocational skills, I see a lot of other things that, like customer service representative. Granted, it's probably an important vocation, but maybe a welding program might be something a little more valid. Maybe something that actually is going to get somebody a job, right? But I still do see vocational programs that are being completed out there when I do my hearings.
Related question relates to literacy, because I think we would all agree that if an individual cannot read or write, that they are severely disadvantaged when it comes to competing for many jobs. And we also know that the literacy rate in the state prison system is awful. Why can't the system do a better job of helping these inmates, especially who are in the system for many, many years, learn to read?
That's a very good question. We do offer educational programs and academic programs. I know at one time, and I've been out of the prisons for a while, honestly, is that we made it where you couldn't get a vocational program until you got your education. I'm not sure if that's the way it's still happening, but I thought that was a very good way to get literacy up. Is before you could move on to another job, you had to learn how to read and write, as far as the system worked.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from witnesses. Witnesses in favor of the nominee. Witnesses in opposition. Mr. Warren, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's hard to believe. Last Thursday was 85 and sunny, and now it's 39. I was home in Hawaii, and now I'm back here.
Begs the question, why did you come back?
To testify today. Actually, I promised the women at the 2 Central Valley prisons I'd do the last Jewish service before I retired, and so I was there on Monday. I'm here in opposition today because I think that the conversation today begs the question. Senator Harman, right now, the recidivism rate is approximately 69 to 70% after 36 months. And education in the prison system has been completely devastated, especially for lifers, because the term lifers mean a person that has an indeterminate sentence to life. They are eligible under the current program at the Department of Corrections only for education 2 years from their parole hearing. Otherwise, they are not allowed to enter into any educational programs whatsoever. As far as psychiatric and psychological and drug rehab programs, they've been cut to 90 days, and only if you're at least 2 years from the gate, assuming you're at a prison that offers them. If you don't happen to be at one that does, you get nothing. The women that I've been visiting for the last 20 years in prison, before I became a volunteer Jewish chaplain for the last 10 years in the prison system, I was a criminal defense attorney. And she's 2 years from the gate, and for the first time, she's being offered an educational class in the state prison system. She's been illiterate. We've done everything we can, sending her books and educational material to no avail. But she starts high school after 20 years next week. The current prison system is in complete state of collapse when it comes to education rehabilitation. Too many teachers were fired.
So is your opposition specifically to Mr. Peck, or is it to the overall state of the system?
It's specifically as to the nominee. I was trying to address a couple of the questions that were raised. Okay. As far as vocational training is concerned, it's almost non-existent anymore. It's all been cut out of the budget. But as to the nominee himself, I've read 30 of the transcripts of his hearings. Granted, I'd like to perhaps define the reading as the classic story of the 3 blind Indians. One grabs the trunk of the elephant, one grabs the leg, and one grabs the tail, and everyone describes the Indian to look that way. And I only read transcripts from people that were very dissatisfied. And my reading as a lawyer, not as a human, as judging the individual as a person, the nominee failed to address the Davis-Lawrence standard, i.e. start at the commitment offense, no matter how horrible it was, and it was horrible, that's how they got there, and then see how the person improved over time. Instead, the transcript indicated that the nominee jumped directly to Chaputis and found the individual not fit for parole. In June, the Supreme Court's going to order the release of approximately 35,000 inmates. And if things go the way some people say, Governor Brown's proposal for a tax increase won't be there, which means there'll be another cut in the Department of Corrections budget. So we have to start looking now as to who we're going to release from prison. People who did horrible things 35 years ago, or people who are about to do horrible things because they've just entered a prison. We have to change the paradigm at the Board of Parole hearings. The number of paroles that are granted are so infinitesimally small that we're forgetting what the Board of Parole hearings are for, to determine under the Davis-Lawrence standard who should be released.
16% of Mr. Peck's cases, according to the statistics I have, result in a parole decision. Is that infinitesimal?
It is when you take a look at the number of individuals, okay, who should be granted parole. After a decade as a Jewish chaplain inside the state prison system, I've seen some very bad people, and I thank God every day they are never released. But I strongly suggest to you a man or woman who's been inside for 35 years, and there are more than 16% who should be released. On Monday, I met a woman who's 55 years old, has senility, has other debilitating disease, and walks with a walker, was denied parole because she's a threat to public safety. That's the standard that was applied here, and that is horrible because that woman's costing the state $500,000. That's among the 84% that were denied parole. And that's why we should be sending a message to the Board of Parole hearing that we need to look to change the paradigm for granting or denying parole.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Warren. I want Mr. Peck to have the opportunity to respond to the specific case that Mr. Warren cited, if you remember it.
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
You don't remember it. Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of cases that maybe somebody doesn't have a lot of I'm sorry. There's a lot of cases. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
Don't remember it. Okay. No other witnesses. Oh, there is. I'm sorry. Please. Are there any other witnesses? Okay. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Vanessa Nelson. I'm with Life Support Alliance. We advocate for the increased parole of suitable term to life prisoners. We have a few concerns and issues we'd like to discuss or like to have Mr. Peck answer to. Fortunately, many of our concerns, which I believe you should all have in a packet that was, or a letter that was included in your packet, have been addressed by the committee, and we thank you for that. Mr. Harmon, just as a point of information, the recidivism rate for lifers paroled is something on the order of 1%, and that figure comes from national as well as local figures. We also would like to know a couple of things from Mr. Peck. Prior to presiding at parole hearings, did you complete the legally mandated hours of training?
I'm sorry. The way that it works is that the witness doesn't direct questions to the nominee. You can essentially put out your questions rhetorically to the committee in terms of what you're concerned about, and then I can ask Mr. Peck to respond.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to ask Mr. Peck directly. This is what we would like to be asked of Mr. Peck.
Why don't you go through your list of things you would like the committee to
Did he complete the legally mandated number of hours, training hours required, and what sort of training and number of hours have been completed in the past year? Is Mr. Peck familiar with the recidivism mitigation factors identified in the Department of Corrections 2010 Adult Institutions Outcome Evaluations Report, and is he prepared to apply those factors in his future hearings? Is it Mr. Peck's policy to deny parole to inmates who have received a 115 in 5 or 10 years prior to the hearing if this 115 did not involve violence? In January 2010, Mr. Peck presided over a parole hearing attended by several Los Angeles County police officers, media personnel, and others as observers, even though this was objected to by the inmate's attorney. In light of this, we would like to know if Mr. Peck would be supportive of allowing prisoners' families and friends to attend parole hearings also in an observer non-participatory role. And also, does he give psychological evaluations submitted by private psychologists as much weight as the psychological exhibits done by the Forensic Assessment Division of the Parole Board?
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
I think those are all. Thank you for your testimony and for coming. I think those were very good comments, and maybe Mr. Peck, you can address them. Do you need to go through them again? Did you do your training hours in the last year?
I did the training hours that were provided by the board.
Are you familiar with these recidivism mitigation factors put out by CDCR, and do you follow them?
I'm probably not as familiar as I need to be. I can't think of what they are right now. You know, I try to focus in on the individual cases that I deal with. That's really what my focus is.
Will you commit to us that you'll go look at them and study them? I will. After the hearing? Thank you. Do you have a blanket policy to deny parole for those who have committed 115 offenses in the last 5 or 10 years if they didn't involve violence?
No.
You don't have that policy?
No.
Okay. Are you supportive in individual cases? I guess would be case by case of allowing prisoner families to observe the parole hearings?
You know, we're required by Marcy's Law, Prop 9, to allow a venue for victims to talk. I'm not sure what value. I have to think about it, but at this moment, I'm not sure what value that would bring. So
you'll think about it,
but I will think about it
as observers, which I think is what the question.
Yeah, I think I probably need to spend a little time thinking about.
Okay, and do you admit private psychological evaluations? I suppose conducted by the inmate or by the inmate's representatives in considering suitability for parole?
Yes, many times.
Okay, thank you. Senator Ahlquist.
Thank you, Senator Steinberg. May I, on the point you just mentioned, may I ask a question? As commissioners and deputy commissioners both sit on the suitability hearings, do you know if all current commissioners and deputy commissioners have received the training on battered women's syndrome?
Yes.
They all have. Thank you.
Very good. All right. I am prepared to support the nominee today. I think the record I reviewed showed a record of fairness and someone who has considers the cases on their merits. I know that some of our staff have observed your conduct of hearings, that the reports I've received have been very favorable in terms of explaining to all the parties how the hearing is to proceed. I would urge you, however, as you go forward here, to spend a little bit of time, or maybe a lot of time, diving into these issues of vocational rehabilitation and literacy, and both department guidelines, but beyond that, because really, in your position, you're an adjudicator, but you're also an ambassador, if you will, for this system, which everyone agrees needs a whole lot of improvement. And since you're witnessing really what's happening on the inside, and you see the strengths and the flaws, I would have hoped today, I was hoping for a little bit more back and forth on your opinion on some of those issues. And I would urge you going forward to really be an ambassador in an appropriate, ethical way. You're an adjudicator, but policymakers need, guidance from people like yourself as we make these very tough decisions about budget and about policy, so that we can help make the system better. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion? All right. Seconded by Senator Harmon. Please call the roll.
Senators Ahlquist? Aye. Ahlquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That passes 4-0, and will go to the Senate floor, I believe, tomorrow. Correct?
Yeah.
Tomorrow. Look, and we'll go forward, obviously, with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your public service.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. You doing okay there, Ina? Okay, good. If folks could file out quietly, we appreciate it. Thank you to the family for coming. Stephanie Shimazu is a member of the Gambling Control Commission. Again, a very, very important regulatory board to ensure the integrity in our gaming for the state, for the protection of the public. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Again, please take a moment if you like, if you have family or special guests in the audience that you want to introduce.
Sure. My husband, Brian Carey, is here. My mother-in-law, Linda Carey.
Welcome.
And actually my daughter, Ella Carey.
Hey,
She's 7.
welcome to you.
She
How
got
old
out of
are you?
school.
7 years old. Wow. You come back here often, okay? Important. All right. Shimazu, brief opening statement, and then we want to get into a couple of the issues.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. And as you said, my name is Stephanie Shimazu, and I'm currently a member of the California Gambling Control Commission. I was first appointed to the commission in January of 2007, as the member with business or governmental experience. In 2010, I was reappointed as the attorney member with regulatory law experience. So I've been on the commission for about 4 years, and I'm currently serving as the acting chair. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here to discuss my confirmation. It's an honor to be here today. Just a brief intro about me. I was born and raised in Sacramento, still live here. I attended UC Davis for undergrad and the University of San Francisco for law school. Since graduation from law school, I've always worked in the public sector. I began as a deputy city attorney with the Sacramento City Attorney's Office. I moved on to the state. I've worked at the Department of Corrections, Ledge Council, Department of Social Services, and before my appointment to the commission, I spent 3 years in the Governor's Legal Affairs Office. As I'm sure you know, the commission, along with the Bureau of Gambling Control, regulate the card rooms in the state. The commission makes licensing determinations for card room owners, for key employees, for prop players, third-party proposition players, as well as findings of suitability for tribal key employees. We also review and approve certain business transactions, and we promulgate regulations. Additionally, we have the responsibility of reviewing certain compact compliance issues for the gaming tribes in the state. So it's been 4 years, and over the past 4 years, I've learned a lot about the gambling industry as a whole, about our card rooms and their owners, about the tribes and the tribal gaming agencies. The commission is still a relatively new entity, and over the years has been given additional responsibility, such as reviewing slot machines at some of the casinos, and most recently, the implementation of the remote caller bingo program.
The what?
The implementation of the remote caller bingo program. So I've seen the commission grow in the last few years, not just in terms of people we have working for us, but I think we've really matured in terms of knowledge and efficiency as well as professionalism. So just some of the things the commission has been doing. Over the past 3 years, we've promulgated regulations to protect the integrity of the gambling industry in the state. Key regulations include minimum internal control standards for card rooms. These regulations address things like the maintenance of accurate records, recording of income, promotion of operational efficiency and integrity, and adherence to prescribed policies and procedures. Additionally, the commission adopted regulations to kind of help relieve the burden on the card room industry by switching from an annual license to a 2-year licensing cycle. It's a little bit easier. Also for establishing a personable portable key employee license. That basically helps it makes it easier for a key employee to change their place of employment. The commission also spent quite a bit of time working on uniform tribal gaming regulations, CGCC 8, pertaining to tribal mix. And while it was by no means a quick or an easy undertaking, in the end, the commission, the Bureau, and the tribes were able to adopt a reg via it's a tribal state association process outlined in the compact. So not only was the adoption of that regulation, I think, historic, but I think just moving through the process, it really helped communication with all of us, and developed a foundation for, I think, an even more better working relationship, which is something we strive for. I know problem gambling is always a concern for the legislature and members of the public, and the Commission shares this concern. We continue to partner with other agencies to promote problem gambling awareness and to really support the efforts of the Office of Problem and Pathological Gambling. And I'm proud to say that the Commission will be receiving, it's the Government Partner Award from OPG in recognition of our efforts in this area.
Very good.
Yeah, so I will be
Thank you.
brief. In conclusion, it's been an honor to serve in this position, and I would welcome the opportunity to continue to serve. So I thank you for consideration, and certainly open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fuller, you have any questions?
Just one, and that was, we talked a little bit about it in our questioning, but what impact do you feel that online gambling will have on your role?
On our role?
Yes.
I think, well, we've been kind of monitoring the bills that have been going through to see kind of what role we are going to have, because right now I think a lot of it is over with the Department of Justice, just in the current drafts. So what we try to do is just be vigilant and make sure that we review those so that we can have input and we can be ready in the event that we get any responsibility, whether it be licensing, whether it be involved in contracting or things like that, and to provide some information that may be helpful in the drafting of the legislation. So it could, depending on what our role is, it could really impact the Commission and its duties.
Thank you.
Senator Alquist, Ms. Alquist.
Thank you. As one who represents 1 million people in Santa Clara County, I'm aware that technology is changing the world, and certainly is changing the gambling industry. And two questions related to that concept. The first would be, how does the Commission really keep up with this expanding world?
Sure. First of all, it's kind of important to note that we have state employees who work for us who really don't have a background in gambling, so we really had to make sure they had received the training. We do have on-premises what do you call it? Just an area, basically, where people can learn. So, and manufacturers will, let us borrow machines so they can practice. So it's really, though, making sure that they are able to go to certain training and to have conversations with other out-of-state folks like Nevada. Really also keep in communication with the manufacturers, and as well as mostly with the electronic stuff, it's with the tribes. So really making sure we communicate with them and make sure that they know what's out there. So we know that it's ever changing and that we need to keep up. So try to do that.
On one of the things you said, I'm glad to hear that you keep in communication with the state of Nevada on what they're doing. I would think that might be a good resource.
Absolutely.
My second question was, how do you ensure you can effectively regulate gambling when instead of going to a casino, you could use your smartphone? How do you... I think that's...
It's
more complex.
Smartphones, I mean, that is something that we are looking at because it's kind of a new phenomenon in terms of you can do everything on the things. And I can just say that we are trying to keep up with that. It's kind of hard because you're right. We go out to the casinos and we check some of the devices, but it's hands-on. It's pulling the programs out and checking the hardware. So it's something that we're aware of, and
I'm sure our Rules Committee would like to get any information as you learn more about that, because I think that's really going to be a huge issue over time.
Right. I know a lot of places too, like just within the casino, you can take things so it's mobile. You don't have to now just sit at a place that you can take.
And my next question is just not mundane exactly, but if the Commission in the first half of 2010 approved 3,544 applications for licenses or findings of suitability, and the approval rate was 99.74% of the time. I ask this as a mathematician. It just sounds like it's pretty easy to get the license.
Yeah, I'm
And
not.
why, and why is that?
Yeah, I know. I saw those numbers and I was kind of surprised because it's true that we do receive, what we do is we get background reports from the Bureau of Gambling Control, sometimes with a recommendation. Our staff gives a recommendation. But all I can say is that we look at each individual application on its own merits and try and look at the people. We're trying to make sure that, like, basically the wrong kind of folks are not in there operating or working. So I know those numbers, I guess maybe don't seem so great, but I know we have denied people, and we also do put a lot of conditions on things where maybe it doesn't meet the threshold where we feel like it has to be revoked or denied, but we put some language in there to try and ensure, like, people maybe have to come see us more often or submit reports from a CPA, things like that, so our comfort level is.
What would stand out as being, since your rate is so high, what would really stand out for a reason to reject someone?
Oh, well, let's say, for example, if the Bureau has gone out and they've gotten notices where they basically have violations, things where we have some people who don't respond to us, and we try to give everyone a fair shake and make sure they have the opportunity to submit information. If they don't, I know we have denied people for that. And sometimes when they're coming in for initial licensure, if we don't think that if we cannot follow the money, if we see a funny loan, if we see that someone really doesn't have the funds to operate like a card room, I mean, those are some things that stick out, and there are multiple other things. I think things like which require the mandatory, where you just can't come in, and like the criminal convictions. Everyone knows what those are, basically. Right. You got a felony, you can't come in. If you have a misdemeanor that involves dishonesty the last 10 years, you're not going to be. So I think some folks kind of get weeded out because the employer, the Bureau, before it gets to us says, that's not going to happen. So
of the options that you mentioned of what could go wrong, the first one being they just didn't really fill out the form correctly. They just need that, that's pretty simple. But the huge one is, following the money, and if you can't really understand how they're going to do this, and it's not on paper.
Right.
So to me, that sounds like a really important one.
It is, and I'm not an accountant, and we do get all this, so I have to have things explained, and I'm very direct with the questions because I need to have it clear in my mind, where is the money coming from? Did you get documentation? And the Bureau's really good about, they need to follow the money, because I need to be at a place where I understand where it's coming from, where it's going to.
So do you have set questions, a set format for delving into that issue?
I don't.
No?
I'm sorry, I don't have a set questions. It kind of depends on, because all the individuals, they have so many different circumstances, and I just look at each one and see. Sometimes it might just be, I might understand, can you follow this? Can you tell me what you looked at here? It just kind of depends on the circumstances.
Okay. It sounds like it would be helpful to have some set questions just to be sure that all the bases are covered.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Harmon?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you a question or two about security and safety of people that use gambling facilities, casinos, card rooms. We've had several reports, and not reports, but it's happened that people are sometimes followed home that have been gambling, have their winnings in their pocket, and they go home, and there's a robbery, and in one case in Southern California recently resulted in a homicide. What efforts does the Commission undertake to try and enhance the safety and security of people that use these facilities, and would you be supportive of additional enhancements to try to make it a safer place?
Yeah, what we just recently did is when I was talking about the minimum internal control standards, we did adopt the regulation for security and surveillance. So before, a lot of the casinos do a good job, but we didn't have any standards in place. So now it's depending on how many tables you operate, you have to have certain additional measures, certain number of cameras inside, outside, or security guards walking certain times of the day. We've kind of tried to tier it up so those larger facilities because we know it's a cost factor, and they're usually open 24/7, to make sure that those are in place. So now if the Bureau goes out and those aren't in place, they have the ability now to issue like a violation, whereas before it was kind of, well, we're not really sure. So now that there are standards in place, and we work with the industry to develop things that seemed reasonable and effective.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question of just clarification based on Senator Alquist's question, because I'm not sure I understood it right. Is there an issue with people gambling on their smartphones, or are the smartphones being used to manipulate the machines inside the casino?
Yeah, the latter, I don't know. I mean, nothing surprises
good.
me anymore, so.
Well,
yeah.
good. I was worried that's what it was, and boy, that's a whole nother.
That hasn't been brought to my attention, but yeah, nothing really surprises me. People find ways.
No, all right. Thank you. Are there witnesses in support of the nominee? Witnesses in opposition? We know that there was no opposition stated on the record. Thank you for your public service.
Thank you.
Former Deputy City Attorney with the City of Sacramento.
Yes.
I think that's,
Says a lot.
5 extra points there. Yeah, absolutely. And Ledge Council, too. So we're very happy to support your nomination and move it forward. Is there a motion? So moved by Senator Fuller. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist? Aye. Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That's 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shimazu. And we'll take this to the floor, I believe, tomorrow for consideration.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you to the family. Very good. All right. We have a handful of governors' appointees subject to confirmation but not required to appear. We also have some committee assignments, namely the Budget Committee. As I said, I think on the floor earlier in the week, working with Senator Dutton and respective staffs to finish up the overall committee assignments and hope to have that by next week when we come before the Rules Committee. We may make announcements earlier than that. We've got the Senate schedule, we've got contingent of the Joint Rules Committee, and we've got one item without reference to file. Are there any, the way we do it here for the new members is after we get done with the members required to appear, I'll take every item at one time, absent items that members would want separated so that they could vote separately or make a comment on whatever the items are. So are there any objections to items 2 through 11? Okay. Senator Harmon? Fine with me. Is there any? Am I missing anything? Okay, it's great. Without objection, we'll take that as a friendly amendment. Okay. So now, are any other objection? Items 2 through 11 with 5 as amended. If not, can I get a motion on the package? I move. Moved by Senator Alquist. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist? Aye. Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Thank you. That is the end of the regular agenda. However, we do have an executive session agenda, so we need to ask the members of the public if they would excuse themselves.